There comes a moment, quiet as a heartbeat, yet louder than any storm, when you realize that the world did not give you your worth, and so it cannot take it away. Some will try, oh yes they will, to measure you with their limited rulers, to dim your light so theirs might appear brighter, to make you question the very ground you stand on. But what they fear, what unsettles them deep within, is not your voice, nor your success. It is the unshakable truth that you know who you are. And when a soul stands rooted in its own value, no storm can bend it, no shadow can swallow it. That is where your power lives, right there, in the unwavering belief that you are enough and have always been. There is a quiet kind of power that does not beg to be seen, does not wrestle for attention, and does not tremble in the presence of doubt. It lives deep within you, in the steady rhythm of your knowing, in the calm certainty that you are not defined by fleeting opinions or passing judgments. When you come to understand who you are, truly, deeply, without apology, you begin to move differently. Your steps grow firmer, your voice steadier, and your spirit less willing to bend for the comfort of others. This knowing is not arrogance, it is alignment. It is the moment you stop asking the world for permission to exist as you were always meant to be. There will be those who feel unsettled by this. They may not say it aloud, but they will sense the shift. You are no longer easily swayed, no longer eager to shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed for your fullness. And that unsettles those who found ease in your uncertainty. Because when you know your worth, you no longer accept less than what honors your soul. You no longer entertain voices that speak to your fear instead of your truth. And in that quiet refusal, you reclaim something that was always yours, your story. You see, the world has a way of trying to write narratives for you. It will hand you labels, expectations, limitations dressed as advice. It will suggest who you should be, how you should speak, what you should dream. And for a time you may have believed it. Many do. But there comes a moment when you begin to question those borrowed scripts, when something within you whispers, "This is not mine." And when you listen to that whisper, when you dare to honor it, you begin to take the pen back into your own hands. Knowing who you are does not mean you will never doubt again. It means that even in the presence of doubt, you will not abandon yourself. You will not betray your values to gain approval, nor silence your truth to avoid discomfort. You will understand that your worth is not a prize to be earned, but a truth to be remembered. And with that understanding, you become unmovable in the ways that matter most. So let them watch, let them wonder, let them misunderstand if they must. Your journey is not theirs to define. You are not here to be shaped by every passing opinion, but to be guided by the steady voice within you that has always known the way. And when you stand in that knowing, quiet, grounded, and whole, you become something they cannot control, cannot diminish, cannot rewrite. You become the author of your own life, and that, in its purest form, is power. There are people who find comfort in control, not always because they are strong, but often because they are uncertain. They build their sense of security on the ability to predict you, to shape your reactions, to keep you small enough to fit within the boundaries they understand. And when you begin to step outside of those boundaries, when your voice grows steady, your choices become your own, and your spirit refuses to be steered, they feel something shift. It is not always anger at first. Sometimes it is confusion, sometimes discomfort, because what they once held no longer belongs to them. Your confidence does not need to be loud to be disruptive. It does not need to argue, prove, or defend itself at every turn. It simply stands calm and rooted, and that alone is enough to unsettle those who relied on your hesitation. When you stop second-guessing your worth, you remove the very space where manipulation once lived. You close the door that doubt used to keep open, and in doing so, you become unfamiliar to those who only knew you when you questioned yourself. Some may try to pull you back into that old version of you. They may test your boundaries, question your growth, or even disguise their discomfort as concern. But what they are truly responding to is the loss of influence. They are not troubled by who you are becoming as much as they are by the fact that they can no longer shape who you are. And that realization can make them restless, because control is easiest where confidence is absent. But you are no longer that place of absence. You are learning to trust your own voice, to sit with your own decisions, to stand firm even when it would be easier to fold. And that kind of self-possession cannot be borrowed or taken. It is built moment by moment, choice by choice. It shows up in the way you no longer rush to explain yourself, in the way you allow silence to speak when it needs to, in the way you choose peace over the need to be understood by everyone. This does not mean you become hard or closed off. It means you become clear. Clear about what you deserve, clear about what you will accept, and clear about what you will no longer carry. And clarity is a powerful thing, because it leaves little room for others to rewrite your intentions or redefine your value. It draws a quiet line that says, "This is who I am," without needing to raise its voice. So if they seem unsettled, let them be. Their discomfort is not your burden to fix. You are not here to make your growth more digestible for those who preferred you uncertain. You are here to live in the fullness of your own truth, even when it shifts the balance of the spaces around you. And when you do that, when you stand in your confidence without apology, you become something they cannot easily grasp. Not because you are distant, but because you are no longer available for control. And in that freedom, you find a strength that answers to no one but the truth within you. There is a strength that does not introduce itself with noise, does not arrive with a need to be applauded, and does not measure its worth by how many eyes turn to look. It moves quietly, like a deep river, steady, certain, and impossible to shake. This is the nature of true self-worth. It does not demand recognition because it is not built on the fragile ground of approval. It is rooted within, in a place no outside voice can reach unless you allow it. And when you stand in that place, you begin to understand that your value was never something you had to prove. There was a time, perhaps, when you felt the need to explain yourself, to justify your choices, to make your worth visible so others might acknowledge it. But that kind of worth is easily disturbed, easily questioned, because it depends on hands outside of your own. What is built within you, however, does not tremble so easily. It does not rise and fall with praise or criticism. It remains even in silence, even in solitude, even when no one is watching. And that is what makes it powerful. It is not performative, it is real. People often mistake quiet confidence for weakness because they are used to equating power with volume. They expect strength to be loud, to announce itself, to demand space. But there is something far more enduring about a presence that does not need to compete. When you walk into a room and carry yourself with calm certainty, when you speak without rushing and listen without shrinking, when you choose your words with care instead of urgency, you reveal a kind of power that cannot be easily imitated. It is not something you put on, it is something you live. And there will be moments when silence becomes your greatest expression. Not the silence of fear or suppression, but the silence of discernment, the kind that knows not every situation deserves your energy. You begin to choose when to speak and when to step back, not because you have nothing to say, but because you understand your peace is worth protecting. In that restraint, there is wisdom. In that stillness, there is control. And in that control, there is a quiet authority that does not need to prove itself to anyone. This unshakable sense of self does not mean you are untouched by life. It means you are not undone by it. You feel, you experience, you grow, but you do not lose yourself in the process. You do not abandon your truth just because the world becomes loud or uncertain. Instead, you return to yourself again and again, like an anchor in shifting waters. And with each return, you grow stronger, more grounded, more sure of who you are. So let others search for validation in noise if they must. Let them chase recognition, approval, and fleeting attention. You have come to know something deeper, that your worth does not need an audience. It does not need to be announced or defended. It simply is. And when you live from that truth, when your presence alone carries the weight of your knowing, you become unshakable in a way that no outside force can diminish. There was never anything small about the way you were created, though the world may have tried to convince you otherwise. From the very beginning, there has been something within you that stretches toward light, something that refuses to be confined, even when circumstances attempt to press you into tighter spaces. And yet, along the way, you may have learned to bend a little more than necessary, to quiet parts of yourself, to make others comfortable, to take up less space so you would not be seen as too much. But the truth remains, you were never designed to live a life that requires you to shrink in order to belong. The pressure to become smaller often comes disguised as acceptance. It whispers that if you just soften your voice, lower your standards, dim your light, you will be easier to love, easier to keep, easier to understand. But what it never tells you is the cost. Because every time you reduce yourself to fit into someone else's expectations, you lose a piece of your authenticity. You trade truth for approval, fullness for comfort, and in doing so, you begin to feel the quiet weight of a life that does not quite feel like your own. There is a certain courage required to take your full shape again. It is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is as simple as choosing to speak when you would have stayed silent, or standing firm where you once would have folded. It is in the moments when you decide that your needs are valid, your voice matters, and your presence does not need to be negotiated. And with each of these choices, you begin to expand, not into something new, but back into who you have always been beneath the layers of expectation. Not everyone will know how to meet you there. Some may resist your growth, not because you are wrong, but because your expansion disrupts the version of you they had grown comfortable with. They may prefer the quieter, more agreeable version of you, the one who made things easier for them. But you are not here to live a life that is convenient for others at the expense of your own truth. Growth will always feel uncomfortable to those who benefit from your stillness. Standing tall does not mean you become unkind or unyielding. It means you become honest. Honest about what you deserve, about what you will accept, and about what no longer aligns with your spirit. It means you allow yourself to be seen fully, even if that visibility comes with the risk of being misunderstood, because there is a deeper loss in hiding than there is in being seen and not accepted. So let yourself rise into your full height, even if it feels unfamiliar at first. Let your voice carry without apology. Let your presence take up the space it naturally fills. You do not need to fold yourself into shapes that make others comfortable, nor do you need to compress your spirit to fit into places that cannot hold you. You were not made to live a reduced version of your life. You were made to stand, to expand, to exist in your fullness without fear. And in that fullness, you will find a freedom that no smaller version of yourself could ever hold. There will always be voices, some loud, some subtle, that attempt to tell you who you are by pointing out who you are not. They may come wrapped in judgment, disguised as advice, or delivered with a certainty that makes you question yourself for a moment. And if you are not careful, if you are not rooted in your own understanding, you may begin to carry those words as if they were truth. But not every opinion deserves a place within you, and not every criticism holds the weight it pretends to carry. What people say about you is often shaped more by their own fears, their own limitations, and their own unhealed places than by anything real about you. A person who has never allowed themselves to dream freely may call your ambition unrealistic. Someone who has been taught to silence their voice may find your honesty uncomfortable. And rather than question their own boundaries, they may try to place those same limits upon you. It is easier for them to shrink your world than to expand their own understanding of it. This is where awareness becomes your protection. When you begin to see criticism not as a definition, but as a reflection, you free yourself from the need to internalize every word spoken about you. You start to listen differently, not with the intent to absorb, but with the wisdom to discern. You recognize that some words are projections, not perceptions, and that they carry the fingerprints of the speaker's experience, not the truth of your identity. That does not mean all criticism is without value. There is growth in listening, in reflecting, in allowing yourself to evolve. But there is a difference between constructive truth and limiting judgment. One invites you to become more of yourself, while the other tries to make you less. One is rooted in understanding, the other in control. And learning to tell the difference is what keeps you grounded in your own worth rather than lost in someone else's perspective. There is a quiet strength in not reacting to every opinion, in not feeling the need to defend yourself against every misunderstanding. When you know who you are, you do not feel compelled to correct every false narrative. You understand that clarity within yourself is more powerful than validation from the outside. And sometimes the most powerful response is not a rebuttal, but a refusal to let those words settle within you at all. People may continue to speak, to judge, to interpret you through the narrow lens of their own experiences. That is something you cannot control. But what you can control is what you choose to carry forward. You can decide that their words will pass through you without taking root, that their limitations will not become your boundaries, that their reflections will not become your definition. So let them speak if they must. Let them misunderstand, misinterpret, and mislabel. You are not obligated to become smaller just because someone else cannot see your full shape. You are not required to rewrite yourself to fit into their understanding. You have your own truth to stand in, your own voice to trust, your own identity to define. And when you hold on to that, when you remain anchored in your own knowing, you become untouched by words that were never meant to define you in the first place. There is a kind of strength that does not announce itself with noise or confrontation. It does not stay where it is constantly misunderstood, and it does not continue to explain itself where it is repeatedly unheard. It simply recognizes when its presence is no longer received with respect, and in that recognition, it chooses movement. Walking away is not always about anger or defeat. More often, it is about clarity. It is the quiet moment when you understand that your energy is too valuable to be spent in places where it is continuously diminished. To walk away requires a deep kind of self-respect, because it asks you to release the need to be understood by everyone. There is a part of human nature that longs to be seen correctly, to be validated, to be affirmed. But life has a way of teaching you that not every misunderstanding is yours to fix, and not every relationship is meant to be repaired at the cost of your own peace. Sometimes the more you try to prove your worth in a place that refuses to recognize it, the more you begin to lose sight of your own value. Choosing peace over proving yourself is not a passive act. It is intentional. It is the decision to no longer participate in cycles that drain you, confuse you, or pull you away from who you are becoming. It is the moment you realize that silence can protect you more than words ever could, and distance can preserve your spirit in ways constant engagement cannot. There is dignity in stepping back, not because you have nothing left to give, but because you understand that not everything deserves your giving. When you walk away, you are not abandoning yourself. You are returning to yourself. You are choosing to preserve the parts of you that were beginning to wear thin in spaces that demanded too much and gave too little. You are acknowledging that your peace is not a negotiable thing, not something to be sacrificed for the comfort of others who do not honor your presence. And in that choice, there is a quiet reclamation of your energy, your focus, and your emotional well-being. There will be times when walking away feels uncomfortable, especially when you have invested your heart, your time, or your hope into something or someone. But attachment does not always equal alignment, and history does not always guarantee harmony. You begin to understand that staying in the wrong place for too long does not make you loyal, it often just makes you tired. And exhaustion is not the same as endurance. So you learn to recognize when enough is enough, not in bitterness, but in wisdom. You stop forcing explanations where there is no willingness to understand. You stop repeating yourself where your voice is not valued. And slowly you realize that peace is not found in being right or being validated, but in being free from the need for either. And in that freedom, something powerful happens. You begin to see that walking away was never about loss. It was about preservation. It was about choosing yourself in a world that often teaches you to choose everything else first. And when you finally honor that choice, you discover a strength that does not need witnesses, a peace that does not require permission, and a self-worth that no longer waits to be confirmed by anyone outside of you. There is something about growth that does not move quietly in the lives of others, even when it feels silent in your own. You may not always notice it happening, but as you begin to rise emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you start to shift the atmosphere around you. Not everyone will celebrate that shift. Some will observe it with discomfort because your becoming reflects something they have not yet faced within themselves. Your light, in its simplest form, does not accuse anyone. It simply reveals what already exists in the dark corners of their avoidance. When you begin to heal, to understand yourself, to outgrow old patterns of thinking, you stop participating in dynamics that once kept you small. And that change, though deeply personal, becomes visible in how you speak, how you carry yourself, how you respond differently to what once pulled you in so easily. It is not that you are trying to outgrow anyone, it is that you are no longer willing to remain where your spirit feels heavy. And that willingness alone can make others uncomfortable, especially those who have chosen not to look inward. Your growth becomes a mirror, though not one you hold up to others intentionally. It is simply what happens when you begin to step into your own truth. And mirrors are not always easy to face. Some people will see in you the very things they have postponed dealing with in themselves: old wounds, unspoken fears, unfinished healing. Instead of turning toward that reflection with courage, they may turn away from it, or worse, try to dim the light that revealed it. But your light was never meant to diminish for the comfort of others. It was never designed to soften its glow so that shadows could remain unchallenged. There is a quiet integrity in simply continuing to grow, even when it is misunderstood. You are not responsible for how others respond to your evolution. You are responsible for honoring it. And honoring it means allowing yourself to keep moving forward, even when it creates distance between you and those who prefer the familiarity of who you used to be. It is important to understand that discomfort in others does not automatically mean you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it simply means you are doing something honest. Growth disrupts stagnation. It interrupts patterns that depend on you remaining unchanged. And anything that disrupts comfort will often be met with resistance. But resistance is not always a sign to stop. Sometimes it is simply a sign that something real is shifting. You do not need to dim your light to make others feel ready for it. Readiness is not your responsibility to manufacture in anyone else. Your role is to continue becoming, to continue unfolding into the version of yourself that feels aligned, whole, and true. And in doing so, you give others a choice, not to follow you, but to confront what they have avoided within themselves. So you keep growing, not in defiance, but in truth. You let your life speak without forcing it to be understood by everyone. And over time, you realize that your light was never the problem. It was simply revealing what was already there, waiting to be acknowledged. And in that realization, you find peace, not in being accepted by all, but in no longer needing to be. There comes a point in every life where the question is no longer what others think of you, but what you are willing to believe about yourself when no one is clapping, when no one is watching, when no one is there to reassure you. That is where self-worth either collapses under old conditioning or rises into something unshakable. To stand firm in the truth that you are enough is not a passing thought. It is a deep internal agreement that changes the way you move through the world. Because once you truly accept that you are enough, something subtle but powerful begins to shift. You stop negotiating your value in rooms where it was never up for debate. You stop over-explaining your existence, your choices, your silence, your boundaries. You stop trying to earn what was never meant to be earned in the first place. And in that stillness, you begin to reclaim energy that was once spent seeking approval. There will still be moments when doubt visits. It does not disappear completely just because you have grown. But the difference is that doubt no longer leads. It no longer drives your decisions or defines your direction. It becomes something you observe rather than obey. You begin to see it for what it is, an old echo of past experiences, not a prophecy of your future. And when you stop feeding it with attention, it loses its grip. Standing firm in your worth does not make life easier, but it makes you freer. It frees you from the exhausting cycle of trying to be understood by everyone. It frees you from bending your truth to fit into spaces that were never designed to hold it. It frees you from the quiet resentment that builds when you abandon yourself repeatedly just to keep others comfortable. And that freedom is not loud, but it is deeply transformative. There is a kind of peace that arrives when you no longer require external validation to feel grounded. You begin to trust your own judgment, your own intuition, your own inner voice. Even when the world feels uncertain, even when others question your path, there is something within you that remains steady. It does not shout, it simply knows. And that knowing becomes your anchor. When you stand in that place long enough, you realize something profound. Much of the power others seem to hold over you was never power at all. It was permission you unknowingly gave away. The moment you withdraw that permission, the dynamic changes, not because others suddenly transform, but because you no longer participate in what diminishes you. And what cannot be sustained by your participation begins to lose its influence. You are enough, not because you have proven it through achievement, approval, or perfection, but because it has always been true beneath everything you were taught to doubt. And the moment you begin to live from that truth, imperfectly, courageously, consistently, you step into a kind of inner freedom that no external voice can override. So stand firm, even when it feels unfamiliar. Stand firm when old doubts try to return. Stand firm when the world attempts to measure you by its shifting standards. Because the moment you truly believe you are enough, without condition, without exception, without apology, the power that once belonged to others over your self-perception quietly dissolves. And in its place, you find something far stronger, a self that no longer needs to be convinced of its own worth.